Okay, I think we're on.
We are. Hello.
Hello, everybody. Once again, my name is Rebecca Thorne. I am here hosting the Monday Critique with Carly. This is
Hello.
Carly Hayward. She did this last time too. This is Carly Hayward. She's amazing. She actually edited my novel like 3 years ago.
It's been a while.
It's been a while, yeah. But she was my Rev Pit editor, and that ended up getting me. Hey, there you go. See, yeah, go Rev Pit. Woohoo! So that ended up getting me my literary agent, which is super cool. So thank you, Carly, for kicking me off on that path. Super excited to be back here with you today. Okay, so we have two different sections today to read, two different first pages. And they're both actually historical. One is an adult historical romance, and the other is a historical with fantasy elements that I'm assuming is also adult. Right? Do you think, Carly?
I think so. Yeah, they're both definitely adult.
We're going to go with adult. So these two books are a little different than last week's. These writers are very close to querying these novels, so we're going to be a little more in depth, I think, with some of the critique that we do, just because by the time you're getting to the querying stage, you want to really go for it, like you don't really want to, like, we're not smoothing any feathers at this point. We're ready to, send you out so that you can just really make your path. So, okay, so we will start with the Wayward Siren, which is the historical with fantasy elements. Wait, there we go.
There we go.
There we go. Okay. All right. So we do have comments up on the right side of the screen. So if you guys decide to comment on the YouTube channel, it takes about 10 or 15 seconds for us to see it. So if there's a delay, that's why. But we will do our best to read any comments that we see out loud. Please remember, if you're in the chat, only positive things. We only want to see happy things about people's stuff. The critiquing will probably be left up to Carly and I. And yeah, and now let's get to it. Okay, here we go. These are so good. Okay. Chapter 1, August 1969, Washington, D.C. Kay sipped on her sidecar, the cheap cognac licking flames at the back of her throat. Across the counter at the back wall, a boxy television hung lopsided from the pub ceiling, broken black and white images flashing across its screen. The bartender hopped up, banged the side of the box, then repositioned the rabbit ears with the end of a broom. The horizontal lines waved and wiggled, then snapped into a coherent stream. Thanks, Kay said, then tapped her pencil on the folded newspaper on the countertop. 6-letter word, to vouch for, starts with A. He picked up a rag, scrubbed the inside of a glass, then shrugged. A test, she said, her eyes lifting to the images on the screen. The view zoomed out, showing thousands of people swarming the streets around Chicago's convention center, some of them climbing statues and waving flags, some holding lighters and singing, some marching with their signs. A voice shouting over the din crackled from the TV speaker. While the anti-non-protester rally, the DNC goers are being held inside the convention center like prisoners, deciding the next presidential candidate. 5-letter word. In 1960, this windswept lady caused nearly $1 billion in damage. The bartender scrubbed harder. I assume that's harder. Kate flinched at the sharp notes produced by the wet rag against the glass. Hurricane Donna, she said quietly, her head turning at the sound of the pub door opening. Ah, right on time. Chilean ambassador Gustavo Silva entered the pub, passed Kay, and took a seat at the end of the bar. He removed his officer hat and ordered a martini. Gustavo's schedule followed a rigid routine, which included stopping in at his favorite pub every night at 7 p.m. The same time, the same stool, the same drink. She watched from the corner of her eye as he received the gin martini. Although he'd removed his military cap, his jacket stayed. The temperature had peaked over 90 degrees in D.C. that day with 60% humidity, most of it leaking through the pub's poorly maintained structure. But still, he wore the jacket. Double-breasted, dark olive-colored wool, polished brass buttons fixed to his midsection, and prominent yellow and red patches covering the left breast pocket. It's a show of power. While Gustavo downed his first martini, ordered another, and chatted with the bartender, Kay squeezed one more clue out of the night. 4-letter word, flower holder. The last letter is E, vase. She scribbled, then stuffed the crossword puzzle and pencil into her clutch. The coverage on the screen shifted its focus into the Chicago police and the throngs behind them shouting, "The whole world is watching!" Protesters broke through the police line. Police tackled as many as they could, then lined them up against the building, beating them with batons. Gustavo pointed at the screen, laughing at an up-close of a young protester's bloody face. Kay knew this kind of man, the kind of man that once felt powerless and small, and would do anything to avoid feeling that again. Hurting others as a mean to his own ends, a man that coveted power to forget how small he felt. She leaned forward and slid her elbow across the countertop. Her eyes towards the television screen, she pretended to watch. As expected, Gustavo's gaze wandered from the images on the television to her profile. She brushed her hair over the shoulder nearest him. Nails painted dragon red, she swept her fingers down her bare arm, keeping a rigid spine in the green velveteen dress. Women of virtue and standing were expected to appear a certain way, groomed but sexy, showing skin not enough to be judged loose. The restraints and rules of modern womanhood confused Kay, but she followed the rules, especially when using them as a weapon against men like Gustavo. She'd read his dossier once. That was all she needed. She heard the fluids in his eye sockets gushing as they swiveled. Though Kay's hearing was freakishly acute, this was unlikely. What she did hear, as expected, was a quickening of the breath and a resting heart rate slowly escalating. She let him stare, let him want. Then, when the gawking reached the target threshold, she tipped her chin in his direction. She gave him a small, crooked smile. She brushed her fingertips along her neck, then turned her attention to the bartender. Gustavo tapped the countertop. "Senor, a refresh of the drink for the lady," he said in a clipped, heavily accented English. Kay ordered another sidecar. When the cocktail arrived, she briefly acknowledged Gustavo by raising the glass and sipping at its edge. As expected, Gustavo left his stool and took the one next to her. She kept her body and eyes forward, not wanting to appear too eager. What is the beautiful lady doing alone in a bar like this?" he asked after a moment's silence. "Gracias," she said, tapping the glass. "De nada, mi..." Oh God, this is going to be hard. "De nada, mi belleza. Belleza? This is so sad. I'm so sorry.
Chilean, right?
Yeah, Chilean. Yeah, belleza.
Belleza. I honestly don't know. I'm probably butchering it. So
sorry. I'm going to try real hard. Where is your husband? She swiveled on the chair to face him, or on the stool to face him, crossing her legs. "A girl can't sit in a bar without being married." He smiled wide, light glinting off a gold crown molar. "In this town, I suppose it is possible. Tell me your name, mi Bieza." It's gonna be hard.
We're failing already.
Failing hardcore. Kay, though her surname changed from town to town, job to job, responding to different first names attempted once, stretched her mind to its limits. It was enough to maintain an illusion of normalcy from day to day. "This is a sweet-smelling name, mi Bieza. Tell me, where do you come from? Are all American women so beautiful?" This would be too easy. "Are all foreign dignitaries so handsome?" He frowned. "Too smart. Don't be too smart." Kay delicately brushed the colorful patches along the breast pocket of his jacket. "What did you do to earn all these praises?" His smile returned. "Yes, I was a soldier. I am a soldier. The call to the battlefield never dies, yes? I wouldn't know. Never had the chance to step onto a battlefield." He extended a hand. "I find that difficult to believe. Gustavo Alessandro Silva, envoy y ambassador. Disculpa, senora. I am the representative for the Republic of Chile to America, he corrected himself. "Pleasure to meet you, Gustavo." Gustavo's bristly stash tickled Kay's knuckles as he kissed them. He kept Kay's hand for a full minute, only letting go when the news correspondent announced a new twist in the story. "Someone is being carried off the convention floor by private security personnel. Is he a protester? Did he somehow make it past the vanguard in the hall's lobby? Excuse me, sirs, is that a protester or a delegate? Where are you taking him?" The live feed shows the reporter stepping in front of 6 men dressed in black, heavily armed, only to be punched in the gut. Down he went. Gustavo laughed aloud, slapping a meaty palm on his knee. The coverage shifted to the front of the convention center. Full chaos had erupted. A throng of hundreds pressed through the police line towards the doors. The police picked off anyone at the fringes, beating them with batons, lobbing tear gas in random directions. Another reporter entered the frame. "We've been told Mayor Daley gave the Chicago PD full rights to riot against the crowd here tonight, and yes, it appears they're all acting against journalists and reporters as well." The cameraman staggered backwards, capturing images of white helmets charging and batons swinging. What a fucking mess, Kay thought. Gustavo laughed again. "These hippies are getting what they deserve, huh? This mayor of Chicago is a decisive man, a wise man. Too many of your country's young people wander around with no purpose. A good beating could give them direction." Kay swallowed through the smile. She flashed her green eyes and nodded. It was the most she could do without breathing fire. "Have you, Kay, been to Chile?" he asked. "No." "Ah, it is beautiful. From the high Andes range to the white sands of Bahia Inglesa. Do you like the beach?" Kay enjoyed the depths of quiet forests where no humans trod. I loved the beach, the smell of coconut in the air, the feel of the sun on my skin. Wheels turned behind his hungry eyes. Kay saw herself in his mind's eye wearing a bikini, her back getting rubbed down by his greasy palms. The stool legs groaned and the metal feet screeched across the floor as he scooched inches closer. Do you know Chile is one of the longest countries on the planet? I actually did, he continued, ignoring Kay's start. See, our territory even expands south into Antarctica by some 3,000 kilometers. I did not know that. She did. But enough talk of maps. Tell me, mi Bieza, where do you like to go next? To dinner? For a stroll through the capital? Perhaps you would like to see the consulate. It's only a 4-block walk. I have a rare map of Pan America from the earliest 20th century, gifted to me by El Presidente himself. Kay downed the remainder of her cocktail and swiveled left. She uncrossed her legs, held her thighs tight together, and jutted her chin towards the hallway behind him. Why wait that long? He looked over his shoulder, then turned back, glancing at the bartender slicing limes. Well, she pressed impatiently. He frowned, then in one gulp finished his second martini and extended a hand. Mi belleza. She grabbed her clutch in one hand and laid the other in his. Then he stopped in front of the men's. As he stopped in front of the men's room, she pulled him forward. Senor, trust me. The women's room is far nicer. He grinned and followed Kay into the small women's restroom. As soon as the door shut, he locked it and turned, pressing Kay into the wall. His mouth and hands were everywhere at once. His hot breath, smelling of cigar smoke and cheap gin, washed over Kay's bare neck and chest. But every other smell was overwhelmed by days-old sweat, soaked into the fibers of his distinguished woolen military jacket. He unbuckled his belt, then unzipped his pants. He pulled upward at the hem of Kay's velvet dress until she heard ripping. Kay gagged, pushing him away. No, wait. No, senora. He pulled harder. Kay gagged again. Anger, not focus, called her ability. Her eyes rolled upwards. She grabbed the sides of his head and twisted, whispering in his ear, "Stay very still." The words slithered into the air, filling the small room like a fog. So obviously this isn't the entire thing. We put a 1,500 word limit in, and this one went a little bit over, but with good intention, because obviously we needed to see this.
We did. It's a good end.
Yeah, that was a good ending for that. Okay, so Carly, you want to kick this off?
Sure. So this one I was actually really, really nitpicky because it's pretty great already. So my notes are very like, could you tweak this small thing a little bit? I think my main concern was her abilities and her power.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Right? Mm-hmm. I feel like, yes, going into the book, in theory, we would know that it has fantasy elements. But you kind of want to start getting that in there, like on the first page. Yeah. Because you don't want that to be a reveal so late on. I know it doesn't feel very late, but I think our first hint of it is when she listens to his heartbeat.
Yeah. On that topic, let's talk about this sentence.
Yeah.
She heard the fluids in his eye sockets gushing as they swiveled. I would definitely rephrase just that sentence because that was weird to me. And because this is really the first glimpse that we see at a fantasy setting. I was left after this point, like before I found out it's witches. That's what this book has. But I was thinking vampires because I didn't know. I was like, oh, well, like her hearing is acute. She's like listening to his eye sockets gush. I'm like, I don't even know what that would sound like. But I think that, and she's listening to his heart rate and like the quickening of his breath. And I'm like, those all seem like very like predatory things that like a vampire would be feeling. So I wonder if there's a way to kind of add like earlier on. I mean, I agree on the first page, you almost really need to get some hint of magic in there.
Yes.
And what kind of magic she does, because like witches can have a lot of different kinds of magic. And I would really like to know the difference between them, I guess, yep. Is she more of like a New Orleans kind of magic, like a voodoo magic, or is she more of like a nature magic? Because she mentioned the forest, like a nymph kind of magic, or like, is it just like general magic overall? And I think that would be pretty easy to add somewhere in the beginning here, just because all you probably would have to do is add like a sentence where maybe like the bartender turns his back and she kind of like pulls the bottle of cognac closer to her or something like that, like even if it's just like she like waves her finger and like and like something moves towards her, like that would imply that she has some kind of magic that's a little supernatural without giving us too much, you know?
I agree. I think with fantasies, especially when someone has powers, the first and most important detail or like world building you need to hammer out is what your main character's powers are.
Yep.
Like as simple as it gets, as basic as it gets, like, and I'm already confused by her powers. I mean, she has super hearing and her words have power, maybe. I'm not
Yeah.
exactly sure what she does at the end, if it's a spell.
Ooh, if her words had power, that would put a lot of weight into the crossword. That'd be pretty cool.
That would be pretty cool.
That would be really cool.
And that'd be a good way to tie it in too.
Yeah, it would be a really good way to tie that in. Yeah, the crossword I liked as a character trait, but I do think that you could do more with it. You know, like the most interesting one that she was looking at was Hurricane Donna, because that immediately told us a little bit about the setting and the time that this was set in, you know. And I think that if you're going to be doing a crossword like that, like changing this from something so mundane as a test to something that maybe directly relates to what's happening on the TV, or like a politician of the time or something.
Or something magical.
Yeah, or something magical even. Yeah, that'd be really cool. I think
I liked the hurricane one, but agreed. Yeah. Especially Vase. Vase was the most mundane one for me.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah, it seemed like an interesting character thing, but it didn't really, I feel like there's more you could be doing with that. Like you can take this sentence and really make it work for you in a setting context.
Yep. It's a good world building moment.
Yeah, a really good world building moment. So I think that would probably be something I would recommend. I love the TV going at the time though. Like
I did too.
All this flash of this, you know, protest happening and how it kind of parallels what she's doing with him.
Some of it was a little bit hard to follow action wise.
Yeah.
I think the action could be a little bit tighter and cleaner. I can't remember exactly which section, but one of them where I think it's when they start attacking the reporters. I got a little thrown off by.
This part right here?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think it was this last sentence, or not second to last sentence, where he gets punched in the gut. It's a little passive the way it's happening.
Yeah, I would agree with that. You know, I think that I almost wonder if maybe you could break up the thing where like he approaches the men in black over here, like in this area, and then have him like shout to them, "Where are you taking him?" And then have him be like their fists slammed into his chest or something.
Yep, I agree.
Down he went, kind of thing.
I liked down he went, but
yeah, I liked down he went a lot. Yeah, I mean the writing style here is fantastic. You know, I really liked it overall. I do think that it's kind of difficult to figure out Kay as a character with what we were given here.
Yeah, she seemed very analytical to me. That was my impression of her, where like emotions until the end didn't seem to actually really affect her a ton. She was pretty cold.
Right.
There was like two moments, the end and then when she gets mad at him and doesn't want to breathe fire. Those were the only emotions we kind of saw from her, and I think I could have used a little bit more.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I enjoyed, like, I think the Chilean representative was very unique. I don't really think that I've seen too much of that kind of person. Like we've all seen men like this, but the flair that he had, I thought was very interesting.
He felt more fleshed out than she did.
He did feel more fleshed out than she did, and I think that that's not quite the step forward you want to go with your main character, especially because you kind of mentioned up here that where was she talking about with her name? There we go. This sentence I would rephrase. I read it like 3 different times and still don't really know what it's trying to say.
I got it, but yeah,
I kind of understood. I just I think it could be done a little better. And I think that because like if this isn't really her name, I almost at this point would like to see a little glimpse into who she really is, because it's not like she's going to be lying to herself. unless she is lying to herself. I don't know. Maybe she is.
I assumed Kay was her real name and she just couldn't remember any new last names. Or she couldn't remember any new first names, so she only changed her last names.
Oh, is Kay her last name?
No, Kay's her first name, I thought.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's always Kay something.
Okay, yeah, I definitely get that. Yeah, I think that this could be a place where maybe she could add a little hint of who she is outside of talking to men like this.
I agree.
You know, like when she tells, like, a name is a very personal thing, you know, like names come with, even if our name doesn't change, they come with a lot of background. And I think that this would be a really good place to kind of like add a sentence or two of that to kind of give the reader a bit more of a hint about who she is, outside of what she's doing here. I'm not going to lie, before I realized the supernatural element to this, I actually thought she was a spy, which would be super cool.
I assume she's probably both.
I'm like, probably both. Yeah, a witch spy. I mean, that's pretty bad.
I'm already sold.
Yeah,
two words, you've got me. Witch spy.
Witch spy. I'm like, oh yeah.
Into it.
So yeah, I mean, I almost think that I would maybe play up if she is like a spy and this is like her mission to go after the men like this. I almost think that you should maybe play that up for her, where she's like not just talking about him as, like, and what he does every day and how she's read his dossier. I almost wonder if she could just be like, once I get through this mission, I can go curl up at home and read a book, or whatever she likes to do when she's at home. Like, she could be thinking that while she's kind of like, okay, just one more thing. Or if she's really into this, maybe show a little bit more like of an eager sense from her. Like I almost kind of feel like she's just going through the motions here, like there's no,
it's very cold.
Yeah, it's very cold. Yeah. Like there's no, like, we don't really know how she feels about doing what she's doing with this character. And I think that is something that could very easily be clarified with just a couple sentences here or there, changing a little bit of the descriptors around her dialogue.
Right. I agree. I don't mind her being very cold and very analytical about it, but it needs to be clear if that's who she is and like the job has made her this.
Right.
Or is it just lacking in the emotion? It needs to just be a little bit more distinctive, I think.
Yeah. Wendy said both in her comments. So I guess we're on there. So yeah, I mean, overall, I thought that this was incredibly well done. I actually thought that this was a really engaging beginning.
The only other big-ish note I had was I want her to start hinting a little bit more at why Kay needs Gustavo and like what her mission is here.
Yeah.
Like why is she
I'm sure that we get into it later. But I agree that there could be like some lead-ins where, and I think that again kind of ties in with like the mission. Like,
agreed.
Like if she was going to even just have a sentence to herself where she's like, okay, if I get through this, then we'll get this.
Exactly.
Then it would kind of help explain, I think, about.
We don't need to give it all away. I just want to start understanding the purpose.
Yeah, just a hint, I think. So so yeah, I mean, I think that if you can bring the magic in a little earlier and then kind of clarify what type of magic this witch has, so that we're not thinking vampire like I did. I think it was really just the predatorial moment where like
it was very predatory.
Yeah, it's very predatory, and I think that when I think predatory, I think vampires. So
I didn't go vampire, but I wasn't convinced it was magic yet. I was like, is she just like a superhuman listener?
Yeah.
I was just trying to figure it out for a little bit. It just took me longer than it probably should have.
Yep, I agree. So yeah, I think that is I mean, I think that if you can do that, this beginning is really, really good.
It was very strong. This is like very nitpicky.
Very nitpicky. Yeah. I mean, you really did a great job with this. I think that all the stuff that we just talked about would probably take you like 20 minutes to edit.
Seriously.
Which is pretty big for the first chapter. I think that this is definitely ready to go see agents. So.
And also maybe change some of the words so that Rebecca can pronounce them. That might be helpful.
I thought I did pretty good with some of them.
No, you did very well. I was just teasing.
I got the disculpe.
Disculpe, that was very good.
That was pretty good.
No, you did great. Just the one word.
Why is this word so hard for me?
I honestly don't know, so it's not just you.
I'll be Googling it tonight. I'll be Googling it. That's for sure. This is what I get for loving to read things out loud. I'm just like, and they're like, here's this word, and I'm like, oh shit,
oh, no.
I've made a huge mistake. That was the other thing I really loved too, is how you wove the like the Spanish in with like the English that he's trying to say. You know, like this felt like he was bilingual, and you could tell that English was not his first language, which I think is really, really hard.
It is. And it was very naturally done too.
Very naturally done. Yeah. Like the fact that he was like, to the America, and then he's like, to America.
Right. It was so good. I was impressed.
That was a really beautifully done, like, good job mingling that language together, because I think that's I really think that, like, except no, we're not destroying your manuscript.
No.
We've given you like 3 things to do and it'll take you 20 minutes. Anyway, yeah, I loved it. I thought this was great. So overall, that's what I have to say. All right, so are we ready to move on?
Yes. To the next one.
To the next one. Well, we're not going to say that now. Okay. All right, hang on. I got to change the banner because I forgot to do that last time. Wait. There we go. Okay. All right, so we are about to read A Revenge Worth Taking. It's an adult historical romance.
It's a great title.
It's a great title. Yeah. Very, very amazing title, Rochele. I love it. Okay. The curtain fell, its velvet folds billowing across the worn floorboards to hide the blinding glare of gas footlights. Oh my God, I can read. Eliza straightened from her exaggerated bow, ears ringing with the thunderous applause that echoed through the theater. Her pulse thrummed as she fought to catch her breath. When she turned, strong hands clasped around her waist to lift and spin her in a dizzying circle. The lights swirled around her, and she let loose an exuberant laugh. Eliza, my girl, you've done it again. She stared into the bronze-flecked eyes of the man who'd made this all possible. Heady with exhilaration, she could only smile her thanks to the young playwright. Thomas set her down and gestured to the curtain, behind which boisterous shouts to see an encore performance from the Painted Lady rose. Best get you out of here before they storm the stage, Thomas winked before turning heel. Eliza gave a little shiver. After the main act, the crowds tended to be a little less civilized. With a wary glance at the curtain, she hurried after Thomas to her changing room. Once the door shut, she sank into a plush armchair and snatched a pamphlet from the tray, fanning herself while Thomas lit several lanterns. Beads of perspiration clung to her chest, and she resisted the urge to wipe her damp forehead lest she dirty her hands. Instead, she tugged at the black lace lining the bust of her corset. Tom, help me out of this wretched thing. I'm suffocating over here. Thomas chuckled and perched on an armrest as she twisted her back to him. He leaned over and with practiced fingers plucked the laces loose. With the constrictive boning relinquishing its grip on her chest, Eliza sucked in a deep breath. In all her years, she'd never grown to appreciate the confounded things. Even this one, fashioned to be worn over her costume, drove her mad. Thomas retrieved a basin of water and plopped onto the ottoman in front of her. He dipped the corner of a wool rag in and held it up. You'll feel much better once you've cleaned up. She closed her eyes and leaned forward as he wiped the cool cloth across one cheek, then each stroke washing away the heavy black and gold paint. Silence cloaked them as he worked, punctuated by gentle splashes and dripping water. Her forehead wrinkled. Usually Thomas was all chatter. This quietness didn't fit him. And she could guess why. Her lashes lifted and she peered at him. How's George? I haven't seen him around in a while, she murmured as he finished, keeping a close eye on his boyish face. Thomas stiffened for the briefest moments. He's fine, jealous of all the time I spend around beautiful women here. She lifted a brow at the bitterness in his tone. Thomas pulled the strained cloth away. There, no more Painted Lady. Eliza pursed her lips. Though she yearned to question her friend deeper about his mood, she held her tongue. Not after the success of tonight's show. The pamphlet she'd used as a fan lay open in her lap, and she stared at the depiction of her face on the front of it, intricate swirls of paint covering her forehead and cheeks. Thomas touched her arm. These are the newest batch. Only 2 weeks into the performance, and you've taken Chicago by storm. The next 2 weekends are sold out. Eliza's fingers skimmed over the print, and an emptiness gnawed at her elation. I wish I didn't have to hide myself. Thomas stood with a placating smile. Maybe someday you won't. He flipped open an ornate brass pocket watch, then snapped it shut and held out his hand. Speaking of hidden identities, don't you have a party to be at? Eliza groaned, but let him pull her to her feet. Dinner party. Funny how those 2 words could send her crashing back to reality. She unpinned her elaborate hat, careful not to disturb her coiled hair, and stepped behind the changing screen. The conservative evening gown behind it hung in stark contrast to her flimsy costume. Burgundy silk trailed along her plunging neckline to frame the creamy skin of her cleavage in a scandalous display, and the dropped sleeves left pale shoulders bare. A fringe skirt fell just past her knees, exposing a highly inappropriate amount of leg. Eliza's lips quirked. Her aunt would have it a Okay, here's another one.
Apoplexy.
Apoplexy. Oh my God. These are one of those words that you see but never have to read out loud.
Yep.
If he saw her dressed like this. Eliza slipped from the costume and peeled her opaque tights off, relishing the fresh air against her skin. The lighting in the room dimmed, and she glanced at the high window on the other side of the room. Sunset's golden rays pierced the sky, and her shoulders drooped. She had precious little time to make it to Mrs. Johnson's home before she would be missed. Though she loathed the woman and her pompous parties, her aunt would never forgive her if she failed to show up. With a sigh, she yanked her petticoats and the dress over her head, scowling at the ridiculous bustle at the back. After tugging on her boots, she stepped from behind the screen. Thomas hurried over to tie her laces while she pulled on calfskin gloves. A knock sounded at the door. "Come in," Eliza called as she turned to the mirror and adjusted a loose strand of mahogany hair. The door cracked and the theater manager's hawk-like nose appeared. "Just wanted you to be aware several persistent journalists have set up camp at the entrance of the hallway. They are demanding a private audience with the painted lady." Eliza frowned. Great, just what she needed, nosy reporters trying to reveal her true identity. Well, they won't be getting one. "As you wish, ma'am." The man nodded and disappeared. Thomas offered her his arm. "Guess you'll be taking the alleyway tonight." Eliza slipped her hand into his elbow, and he led her down the wooden hallway, away from the front of the Dearborn Theater and the waiting journalists. Their steps echoed off wood-paneled walls, lined with posters of past shows. "I've been writing some ideas for the winter play." Eliza clamped her mouth shut and peered at Thomas. As the main playwright at the Dearborn, he had always encouraged her to take an active role in the theater's productions. And though she considered him a dear friend, she never admitted her dreams of becoming a playwright herself, until now. Her blood pounded in her head. Thomas smiled, and the ragged edges of her fear softened. "Really? Why don't you bring in what you have tomorrow? I'd love to take a look." Eliza's heart skipped a beat at the encouragement. She'd been worried he would be upset or worse, brush it off. After all, in the words of the theater's owner, women had no place scripting plays. Her shoulders straightened. Someday, she would change that. Thomas opened the back door and leaned out. "Coast is clear. Let's get you to the street and safely in a cab." He walked her down the steps into the crisp air, and she pulled her hand from his arm. "Tom, I'll be fine. You go finish up and get home to George." Thomas crossed his arms and clucked. "Liza, you're a respectable lady. What kind of man would I be to let you walk the streets alone?" Eliza put her hands on her hips. "You sound like an old hen. It's an alley, not a street, and it's a perfectly decent hour." She pushed a finger to his chest. "You deserve a night off. Lord knows you spend too much time here already." Thomas flashed her a sheepish frown. "All right then, but straight to the street and into a cab with you." Eliza leaned forward and planted a kiss on his cheek. "Have a good night, and tell George I send my regards." She stepped into the alleyway between two brick buildings and set off at a brisk pace. A few strides in, she slowed and chewed her bottom lip. Mrs. Johnson's home was in the opposite direction, and if she cut over to the next street, she would have much better luck hailing a cab than in front of the busy theater. She turned and backtracked past the theater, lifting her skirts to step around piles of refuse. Her nose wrinkled at the uncleanliness. A word with the theater manager would be in order. As she passed an alcove, muffled voices floated from within the shadows. She slowed and peered around an overflowing trash bin. Two men argued in a doorway, and she frowned. Mr. Brown, owner of the McKinley Theater, their biggest competitor, faced her. A very influential man in the city, he had just announced a potential run for mayor. What in the world was he doing over there? She slipped into the dark space and sidled closer to hear. "I will not stand for this. If you think you can bully your way into my favor, you'd better think twice. It's time someone put their foot down on your antics." Mr. Brown's cheeks flushed red as he spoke. The man with his back to Eliza shrugged. "So be it." His hand moved so fast it took Eliza a moment to register he'd drawn a pistol. Oh, God. He pointed the gun at Brown's head. "And here I thought we'd make a great team." The pistol discharged in a thunderous blast, and Eliza's hand flew to her mouth, not quite in time to stifle her scream, as blood misted the air behind Brown and his body slumped to the ground. His attacker spun and locked eyes with her, and Eliza's blood chilled. She knew him. I love a good murder. Like, yes, kill them all.
Kill all the characters.
Kill all the characters.
That's how every good book ends. Everyone is dead.
Everyone is dead. I mean, except for the pairs I'm rooting for.
Well, yes.
Yeah.
Except for them.
Except for them. Okay, so your writing style is simply gorgeous. Like, this feels very historical to me. Like, I can feel like I don't know, like the description of the clothes, the description of like the room that they're in, the way that they talk, like, you've done a really good job of placing us in a historical scene. I think one of my biggest complaints was that as far as setting goes, it's very hard to pin where and when this is. You mentioned Chicago, taking Chicago by storm, but with the gaslight lamps, that could be, I mean, any time in Chicago in 100 years, depending on where it is. So, Carly, did you agree with that? Or
I completely agree. I don't know that I want to start with her on the stage, because I don't think we're getting enough of like the scene from that, at least with her on the stage with the curtain closing immediately.
Yeah.
Well, I wanted to like be more invested in where I was and when I was.
Right. Well, and I kind of think that, instead of going through how she changes out of her uniform and gets back into normal clothes, like there was a lot of paragraphs about clothes. And I feel like maybe we could do something better with that space.
Yeah. So
like this whole section.
This paragraph.
Yeah.
The one before this one. Yeah. This one is a little bit of a pet peeve of mine. I don't love it. I'm in romances when the female lead describes herself, like physically.
Yeah,
I know she's not in a mirror, but it feels like it's that trope of looking at a mirror and describing your whole look.
Well, and I think that the descriptions are really beautiful. Like I love the burgundy silk trailing down her plunging neckline. Like I have a very clear idea of what this dress looks like. I just don't know how it matters to the rest of the story.
Yeah, I think one of the details and more focused on how it feels.
Yeah, and how she feels in it, maybe.
Exactly. So
reflecting back on her personality and where she is in life. I think
how the silk feels on her skin is more important than the cleavage in this moment.
And I think that kind of leads me into one of my biggest critiques with this type of writing style. Like Rochele, your writing is gorgeous, but I don't really notice a lot of the senses being incorporated into it. So when it comes to like when she was talking about the refuse in the alley down here, you have her nose wrinkling at the uncleanliness, but you never once describe what the refuse smells like. You just kind of assume that we would know.
You should shy away from it a little bit.
Yeah, like I
feels a little bit like you're.
Yeah, it's a little distant. I think that like you said, feeling the silk on your skin, smelling the shit in the alleyway, like all of those things are really great ways to ground a reader inside a scene and establish a setting in a very strong manner, because we all experience these senses every day, like does she blink against the darkening light? Like, how does that affect like her vision? And just suddenly as the sun starts to set, do the dark corners of the room get darker until her eyes adjust? When she walks into the wooden hallway, is the hallway well lit? Is like those kind of things I think I'd like to see a little more than the clothes and the way that she physically appears.
I agree. I loved when she is peering over the trash bin. I felt like that could have been a more interesting moment of like, does she just like throw her body over the trash? Is she leaning into it? Is she that kind of girl? It's a little down. It was after the refuse.
Oh, sorry.
It was like right after
the
paragraph.
Yeah.
Like, is she the type of girl that doesn't care about her clothes and would just lean over it in order to get a good look?
Right.
Or is she like hovered over it because her aunt would freak out? Like that seems like a better,
really great way for characterization right there.
Exactly. Instead of her analyzing her clothes.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, this really is kind of like writing masterclass. Like this is really something that you would need to worry about if you were not about to query agents, because this is
very nitpicky.
Really just how it's nitpicking. I mean, like this is really just how you take your writing into the next level. By adding like those types of details. Like it's enough. Like anybody can describe what an alley looks like, but like a really good writer describes how their character feels about the alley and puts the reader in that moment. And I think that's just like that next step that you're maybe lacking in certain areas of this.
Yeah, it's how she interacts with her environment. Is she slipping on the refuse as she tries to walk around it?
Right.
Is it on cobblestones that will help us set the scene?
Yeah, it's like the alleyway dirt. Yeah. Well, and I think that like I said, you mentioned Chicago. I think I need to know what year.
Yeah.
And I mean, the other fic did an interesting job where they just put, here's the year, here's the setting, like this 1969 Washington, D.C. And like you could even do something like that, or maybe you already have. But I think that adding more of those like more specific time, like when they're talking about Vietnam and like the non-protests in the last one, that's a very like specific time frame that even if they hadn't told me that it was 1969, I would pretty much have already gone to the 60s. So I think that if you can find something like that with the decade that you're working with to put us like directly into that decade, especially if you can find something local to Chicago, that would be great. Like take this setting bigger. What's happening in Chicago in this decade, and how does it relate to her playwright happening there?
Mm-hmm.
One of the other things that I think could have been done, maybe spaced out a little more, is when she talks about her dream of, like this moment seemed like it would be very big for her, like very like wow,
it feels small.
It feels, it happened so fast that it felt very small, and the way that it's presented, I think, could be changed.
Yeah, it feels like she's telling us her dream, and I'm not like learning about it.
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly, and I think that I don't know. I mean, I almost wonder if, like I was saying, that I think one of the things I'm lacking in this overall first chapter is that there's not a whole ton of tension until somebody gets murdered. There's a little bit there with like the people trying to, figure out who the painted lady is, and her trying to like, no, I don't want you guys to know. But I mean, Thomas is overall a very amicable character, and like, there's no real like tension between her and him. Like things seem almost too easy, and I'm sure that will change later on, but for the beginning, I almost wonder if maybe you could replace Thomas with somebody who likes her a little less, or is like one of those, like, you mentioned that the in the words of the theater owner, women had no place scripting plays. I want to see that. Like, I want to see that scene. I want to see the theater owner stroll into the room and be like, wow, you acted so well. And she could be like, well, I had some ideas for the winter play. And he'd be like, sure.
No.
You silly woman, like I think that would be a really unique way to go about this, that would add instant tension to the room and be far more engaging for somebody just starting a book than talking about how she's changing her clothes.
I agree. If you want to keep Thomas in, I think the way to do it would be strip out some of the George stuff, strip out the clothes, and have Eliza nervous from the moment she sees him about wanting to be a playwright, and he's the playwright, and what does that mean to their relationship? Like that anxiety, if you thread that for longer.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, and I think that even just adding that anxiety in there about like her about to take this huge step where she's got this idea for this next play, but like women don't do that, and the theater manager has made it clear that women don't do that. So like her trying to get Thomas alone while the theater owner is there could be a really good way to kind of like play off of that, where she's
would be great.
Thomas, I have something to tell you. Thomas, maybe, and then, I mean, he can be completely supportive of it, but I think that if you add those external influences around it, that will amp up the tension of this first chapter a lot.
It seems a little like right now we almost have, I don't know, 3 different scenes going on in a row instead of one cohesive moment. So we have her and learning about her being a painted lady and what that means and her hidden identity. And then we learn about the playwright stuff, and then we see the murder. Instead, we want to like thread all of that together. I don't think we need so much detail about her hidden identity. I think that's pretty obvious.
Right. Yeah. I mean, the fact that she's got the paint on her face and that she has to go to a party later, I think is probably enough.
Yes, exactly. I don't need the stagehand coming in, especially because would he even come in, assuming she never does interviews?
I don't think that he came in. I think that he just stuck his nose in.
Well, right. But would he even bother? I feel like he'd come in and be like, take the back way out. The press is camped out front.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. Because I imagine by now they probably know about that,
Right.
So yeah, I would probably agree with you there. Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a lot of potential here. I think that this story clearly is going to go in a very exciting direction very quickly.
It sounds really good.
It sounds really cool. I just think that we should get there a little faster than 1,600 words, like.
Yeah.
the murder happening 1,600 words in. I think that this specific 1,600 words could be rewritten to have more tension throughout. And I do love establishing a normal before you get into a murder. Like I think that's important.
You don't want the murder on the first page.
No, I think that would be too much. But I think that there's more you could be doing for Eliza and her character and the way that she goes about things. And I think that, that would be a really, I don't think it would honestly take you that long to do, like.
No, there's not, you have all the stuff here.
Yeah, there's a lot of meat here. You would just need to change some dialogue and slightly alter the way that the characters are interacting with the scenery around them in order to get that to work. So, yeah.
And I think doing that and focusing on what is anxiety inducing for Eliza before we even get to the murder is also going to help flesh her out a little bit.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I mean, and it would be really an interesting twist if she was so anxious about giving her page, like her writing to the playwright, but then like she witnesses a murder and maybe is just kind of like indignant about it or something like that kind of dichotomy between like what scares her and what should scare her. I think could be, interesting depending on how she reacts to that murder, which we didn't really get to see, but but yeah.
Yeah, I could use more personality from her, I think, in general, like how she feels about things. And
like instead of telling us more about like, she never admitted her dreams of becoming a playwright herself, you could just have her like wringing her hands as she like mentions it to him. And I think that like that's enough, that's pretty much what you need to say or do.
Yeah, her heart should be pounding for a while here, basically.
For sure. Like oh my gosh,
anxiety, nerves,
anxiety moment before you're about to step up onto a stage. And ironic because she's been on stage this whole time,
right?
And like that didn't scare her, but like this would be a really interesting way to show kind of like that dichotomy too. Like she's perfectly comfortable with her hidden persona, but the second it comes down to her and her dreams, suddenly now it's personal.
I was also a little confused about Thomas's role. So I think the actions of him like taking off her makeup and all of that stuff, but still being the playwright, having almost seeming like a boss, but yet a best friend, yet someone who cares for her, like a sidekick almost. I just wanted I wanted their dynamic A, to have more tension, but also B, to just be a little more fleshed out, because he seems to be such an important person to her, and they feel a little cold at times.
Right. Well, and depending on when this is set, like I do kind of have to wonder about a man, like a gay man. I mean, I have to wonder how that's being perceived in society if they're using gaslight lamps.
That sounds very interesting.
It sounds very interesting. Like whether or not they're, when you put it in the context of this century and like where this is, whether or not he's getting a lot, like, is that a secret for him? Like, does she, like, when she mentions George, should she whisper it, or is this open about it,
Right. Is it open, or is this also something he's hiding? Like she's hiding her identity.
Right, exactly. And then how they're together in a room without anybody else supervising, like depending on what time that is, the woman, would a young single woman be allowed to be in a room without one or two?
Probably yes, in the theater.
Yeah, I would assume, but like I kind of want to see a little more about that depending on the context of the decade.
Yeah, I agree.
So yeah, I mean, overall I think that like the bones are here. I just think that it could be amped up a little bit with the tension.
I agree, and there's some like gorgeous lines. Like I love the description.
Incredible.
Especially when he takes off her makeup, like that is a really beautifully written.
Right, exactly.
I think it just needs to be put everywhere a little bit more.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And like how it affects her as a person, like not just the beautiful description, but like how she feels about it. I think
and how it physically feels.
And how it physically feels. Yeah, exactly. Like add this, like, well, how does the makeup smell? Like I want to know how the makeup smells. Like, and did it all come off of her face perfectly, or is it like staining her face a little bit?
Yeah.
Like when I take makeup off suddenly, like if you wear like green makeup or something for Halloween, like that. So I mean, I'm scrubbing after that.
I know. It's never like in Mulan where she just wipes her sleeve.
Just like with her arm and it's just all perfect,
And it's all gone.
It's all gone and perfect. So
if only.
Yep. So yeah, I definitely think that there's a little bit to be done here, but I think that ultimately the bones are awesome.
Yeah.
The writing style is really, really nice.
I loved also how the section ended. I do think that last line could be a little punchier.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, I assume that this probably isn't the end.
I was hoping it was a chapter break.
You think?
It might be, or at least like a something.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not sure. I could see it being a chapter break, and if it is a chapter break, I do agree that it probably needs to be a little punchier.
I think either way, it needs to be a little punchier.
Yeah.
Is assuming the next line is, it was so and so.
Right. Here's how I knew him. You know, here's
Right.
where I've seen him in the past. He was in the audience the last 3 shows. You know, he followed her home last week. That kind of thing.
I kind of wanted to be like, it was him.
Right. I almost would like a mention of him earlier, even if it's super subtle. You know, like depending on where he comes in her life, I almost think that you could slip a sentence in about someone like that. And then when we meet him, we're like, oh yeah, I remember her mentioning that people did that to her, you know? So I think that that would be a really great way to just kind of bring him in without physically bringing this person in. And I also think that we could maybe get a little bit more about Brown before you meet it. Cause like you tell us that they're the biggest competitor, but I think like if you were going to add the manager in where the manager is laughing off her aspirations to be a playwright from the very beginning, and then maybe the manager could get distracted by Mr. Brown or something, or like one of Mr. Brown's associates coming in to like negotiate for the Painted Lady again. And the manager could be like, hang on, I have to handle this, and storm out. And then she could be like, Thomas, here's my script, you know? Something kind of like that. To bring Brown back in so that we know who he is before we see him get murdered, I think would have a lot more emotional impact in that scene.
Yeah. Or like her curiosity in this section too.
Yeah.
Like, oh, it's their biggest competitor. Does she want to go work for him? Is she wondering what he's doing at the show? Like more of that and less about he's running for mayor, maybe.
Right. Yeah, I would agree with that. And especially considering you know, like if her current manager doesn't think that women can be playwrights and he scorns, like depending on how she rewrites this, if he scorns her, would she consider running to Mr. Brown?
Yeah, exactly.
You know, like if her manager is going to be like a dick about it, why would she not? You know,
right?
Like she's clearly got sold out shows. I don't imagine it'd be very hard for her to go the Prestige style over to another theater and get a contract. So,
or is Mr. Brown even worse? And she's
right, like, or has she already started with Mr. Brown and knows that there's no playwrights in the world that would consider her, which is why Thomas is so special, maybe.
Yep, you know? Exactly. Yeah, I think there's a lot of options there.
Yeah.
I think it's focusing too much on trying to give us so many details here and like so much world building that we need more interior stuff. We need more feelings, more physicality.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
A little bit more personality to balance some of this.
Right, definitely.
Yeah. I thought it was great though.
Oh my gosh, like yeah. I think both of these this week they were, you know, you can tell that both of these are just about ready to be queried and or should already be queried, you know. And I think that that's exciting, you know. It's exciting to get to read something in that stage is like, oh man, you put a lot of work and time into this. Thanks.
I know. I'm just looking at my notes right now, and there's like so few.
There's so few. Like I know
it's one page for both.
Like yeah. Carly and I got together, we were just like, I don't have much to say about either of these.
I know. We're like, this is great. I mean, I could definitely pick it apart if we need to, but it's good.
Yep. Yeah, this was fantastic. I really liked both of these. So nice job, guys. So anyway, okay, so let me read through the comments just super fast, just make sure. Okay, we didn't have too much today. Thanks, Amphy. I'm doing great. Thanks.
Your reading was very good.
Thanks. Oh my gosh, it's like all I ever wanted is to read my stuff. Okay, well, I think that's pretty much it for this Monday. I want to tell all you people that next Monday we're probably going to skip just because it's Memorial Day and I'm going camping, so I physically will not be at a computer for most of the weekend.
How dare you not bring a computer on your camping trip?
Sorry, I don't think we're going to have Wi-Fi. I might bring my computer until it dies so that I can do some editing, but we're not going to have Wi-Fi, so we'll see. I mean, I might just be that asshole who like sits on a tree stump just like writing.
That's my girl.
Yeah, mood. Anyway, so next week I think we'll probably skip just because of the holiday weekend, but the week after that we should be pretty good. So thanks for tuning in, you guys. We really appreciate it. Carly, thank you so much for helping.
I had a great time.
Yay, I had a great time too. So, all right, I will talk to you all later. Join our Discord server if you haven't already, and make sure you use Carly for her editing amazingness because it's fabulous and she's amazing. So, all right, bye guys.
Bye.